Hello. I just read The Maze Runner by James Dashner, and then I saw the film The Maze Runner. I think it was released in 2014. And it's always interesting to watch a movie and realize the film directors or film screenplay have taken quite a lot of liberties from the original book to its released film version. I thought I might discuss some of the changes I saw. I don't have the best of memory to remember a lot of details, so I kind of wrote some notes for myself. So if I look this way, that's why. So my big thing is in the first 10 minutes, we see such a huge difference in the storyline. In the story, we were kind of aware that Thomas spent a lot of time in the elevator. His character estimated 30 minutes. And so for film effect of moving a story along, they make it seem like it was a minute. In my opinion, they could have stretched it in a way a little bit to feel longer in the movie. We also know in the beginning of the book, he knew his name was Thomas. He's thinking it in his mind, my name is Thomas, right off the bat. And when he's raised up in the elevator, he was raised up by a rope when he actually meets the boys and was sort of teased off the bat, being named words like clunk and greenie. Those words were kind of unfamiliar to him. And the boys were kind of picking not only at him, but themselves as well. And they kind of had an overall gawking kind of sense when they first met him. So we're given the feeling that he's kind of more scared and confused than anything in the book, and we're told he's surrounded by a bunch of kids and teenagers being kind of welcome to the glade. But in the movie, there was such a stark difference. He's immediately grabbed by Gally, I guess, who jumps into the elevator, and he's shoved kind of menacingly into the dirt. And the boys look kind of less varying ages. They kind of I don't know how old the actual actors were, but they seem, a lot of them, I guess in the book were, anywhere from 12, 11 to 16, 17, 18. But a lot of the boys looked like they were in their, late teens, if anything, to early 20s. And so, he's immediately grabbed by Gally and then again, like I said, shoved menacingly into the dirt. And then he gets scared and he runs off and they say, hey, we got a runner, which, they kind of made it as a sort of a joke, in a way. But in the book, we learn about the glade positions and that Thomas just kind of, at the beginning, is scared, confused, and wants to ask questions. And he has that feeling that he wants to be a runner. So I think as a viewer, I was a bit disappointed that they made everyone out to be older and a bit mean or menacing to him right off the bat. For example, 4 minutes into the movie, the next scene shows Thomas being thrown into what I can imagine is their version of the slammer and put into a small inquisition by Albie. He's then let out, shown around, and a fair amount of what we learn later in the book is kind of revealed right off the bat, about the box and the supplies and the creators. Albie is supposed to be in the book sort of a frustrated, high-strung, little bit of a power-hungry leader. And then we meet Newt, and he's kind of real friendly. So, however, in the movie, I guess for time's sake, they kind of wanted to combine characters. So Albie is kind of fairly nice, in my opinion, to Thomas. Then when Chuck is introduced, it's the first impression that the book fits, or the movie fits the mold. And we get Chuck is around 12 and kind of friendly and upbeat. And the glades and walls seem pretty accurate as well, visually. However, soon after that tiny small movement and boom, the movie takes a turn and all of a sudden Thomas wants to experience the maze. So we kind of miss the endearing moments in the book, that with long conversations between him and his, so to say, new roommate, Chuck being one of the ones that actually tries to answer his questions at the beginning. And he's kind of this endearing tag-along, roommate. And he keeps reaching out to Thomas, to be his friend, when all Thomas kind of felt was confusion and scared. And so whereas in the book he ends up at the shack and encounters the bully Gally and sees the changing with Benny upstairs, that's all missed in the beginning of the movie. Instead, they do this kind of unneeded, weird bonfire initiation night with a frat party, a drinking scene, and then jump into some kind of testosterone competition between Gally and Thomas, to the next day him suddenly wandering and working in the fields and then being attacked by Benny. So this was kind of frustrating because at the beginning it shows that, in the book that Thomas just kind of wants to learn. He wants to figure out what's going on. And Chuck is kind of the one who kind of shares about the walls, the details of the maze, while Newt is the one that kind of takes him on his first tour, and Albie kind of talks to him about different glade positions, the maze, and about the idea of the runners. And the timeline of the events are all quite different. In the movie, Thomas has these dreams about this girl and the facility they're in, and in the movie he also enters the maze before the girl even arrives. However, in the book, the girl arrives in the box. She's kind of under a coma, and he's still all the while learning about the place, gets attacked by Ben, and Ben is sent into a very emotional banishment, which Thomas is very tormented by. He then spends time taking up positions and trying to keep his mind off that emotional time, and about somehow he feels like he knows the girl. And he keeps thinking about being a runner, and in the meantime is pushing for it and making friends with Newt in some ways. And as that scene happens, where he runs in to save Minho and Albie, that's when he kind of gets his first chance at being the idea of a runner. The scene with Minho and Albie in the maze in the movie was kind of looking up like it was going to be accurate. However, I felt like the movie missed some of the main points. They don't share why they were late or injured getting back to the glade. Second, the conversation between Minho and Thomas, Minho was scared and had made a desperate attempt at survival. So it kind of leads to the abandonment in the maze of both Thomas and Albie. And that was kind of a main part of the story, and what kind of led others to kind of trust Thomas more when he got back into the glade from the maze. We also don't see any kind of painstaking process of him saving Albie and himself, and instead the movie, Minho and Thomas kind of carry him, and hoist him up the ivy, and Thomas runs from the griever by jumping across the maze. In the book, there's I don't believe there's like an upper level to the maze, so ultimately this part of the movie, they smash the griever behind a moving wall. However, I don't believe the walls moved at certain times, or they did move at certain times, so I don't know why it would have been moving during the day when they were in there or whatever. Or I guess it was night, but I don't know why they would be moving. I guess, I don't know, it's possible that they were moving at night, I forget that part. In the book, there were like several grievers, in that scene, and when Minho meets back up with Thomas in the maze, that they introduce the idea of cliff where they make their stand and send their grievers plummeting to their death. And Thomas is so shocked, that he survives that, and all the emotions that he's been feeling just kind of breaks down, and he just cries, And so we see the stress and the emotional stuff that he's been kind of holding into him and just spilling out of him, and we feel his like vulnerability and his hurt. So, we kind of missed that with the movie. So again, then there's just timeline changes throughout. The girl arrives, then a strange turn. Thomas, a turn of events. Thomas convinced like Minho that they should go back in the maze, the two of them, and see what they're up against. And then a couple of these other, runners join. They find the griever, they smash it, and then the movie combines the idea of the words of like wicked, beetle blades, as all into like the griever. And then they get back in and they have this metal tracker looking device. And basically, Newt suggests after Galley complains that Thomas should be thrown into what their version of Slammer, it's called the pit, and make Thomas a runner. But there was like no democracy, like meeting vote, or, this whole scene never actually existed in the book. The book, Thomas and Minho get back, they tell Albie, or they tell where Albie is, and then they go see the Medject, and later, Chuck tells them the good news that Albie was able to get down from the vines and he was actually alive, and so that's, gives Thomas relief. And then Albie goes through the changing, and they have a gathering in the homestead of all the keepers to discuss Thomas breaking the rules and how they would handle it, and it's voted that he'll go in the Slammer for a night and then made into a runner. So, they voted, they had a meeting with the keepers, I think that's what they call it. Another major difference in the movie, in my opinion, is the maps. They show the maps as in the movie as one big maze made out of sticks that they built or whatever. Whereas in the books, the runners would, they'd be out in the maze and they'd kind of every once in a while make details and notes and stuff. And then they come back to the map room and write things on different papers, and then they'd stick them into these, I guess, trunks or whatever, and they would compare day to day or whatever. Also, when Teresa wakes up in the movie, she doesn't remember anything. However, in the book, she's the one that kind of has a lot of memories and just kind of sharing it with Thomas, and she knows way more than kind of him. So in the movie, they use Albie to remember things. In the book, they never used him. Albie just kind of remembered things that affected his relationship with Thomas. Like, he doesn't trust him. He feels some sort of, that he saw in his mind, like something that Thomas did and was involved in. Next, the kind of movie goes into this whole other scene where Thomas and Minho go back into the maze with a tracker, find the metal geared gates in a hole, and it kind of like opens up like this or whatever, and that, I guess, is their version of the Griever hole. And they find themselves running for their lives to avoid being trapped by these large control blades. They barely escape, and then they find Albie is awake, and Albie's kind of in this depressive mood. And next there's this like Jurassic Park like scene that happens where the Grievers are grabbing people left and right, and a large group runs into the building. Chuck is grabbed. He's about to be stung. Albie fends it off, and then he's grabbed and yells at Thomas to get them out. The Griever leaves, and I guess Albie's taken. Then Gally returns, punches and blames Thomas that he can't be trusted. Thomas feels this guilt and stabs himself with a leftover Griever stinging needle. He goes through some changing of some kind and gets memories, and Gally then takes the girl and is gonna bring her in front of the maze and use her as a sacrifice, and creates this team of followers, And then Thomas and a group release her and basically convince Gally they're going into the maze, fight Grievers, back themselves, go to the metal geared hole, walk some long corridors, and then they find basically this smashed up science facility. They end up finding a video by Ava Page that tells them the last years of their memories that they didn't remember. She complains that Wicked is good. She kills herself. A panel door opens. Gally follows them in and tells them they can't leave. He's about to try and shoot Thomas or one of them, and Minho throws a spear and kills Gally. In the meantime, Chuck's killed by Gally's bullet, and then the rescue comes in and saves them, and we end up seeing Ava Page alive in a room that explains that the trials were a success, and they took the bait, ending with her saying now that they're starting in phase 2. However, the book side is completely a lot different. We feel the use of telepathy that Teresa uses to reveal Thomas about more of their past lives, the things she can remember. And when the council voted Thomas to be runner, Gally argued why Thomas shouldn't be trusted. And then he kind of gets angry and disappears out in the maze. Then there's this kind of genuinely sweet scene where Thomas and Chuck talk about Chuck wanting to find out who his parents are, And then Albie comes out of this changing. He starts appreciating and treating Thomas different after being saved. But he's kind of changed now, and he goes through these anger spouts and depression about what he's learned from some of his memories back in the world. And then Minho and Thomas start training Thomas as a runner. Minho teaches Thomas about the maps. They go back into the maze to discover the cliff. In the meantime, Teresa and Thomas are starting to get closer, and they kind of share info telepathically or in small meetings. And then Teresa shares that the maze is a code. And, like in the book, they kind of just accept her, in the movie, they just kind of accept her. In the book, they felt a lot of mistrust towards her. And so for a while, they kind of keep her separated. And then finally, Thomas keeps feeling like they can trust her and defends reasons why they need her. And finally, they kind of, start letting her be more involved. Next, we find that things start changing. The walls stay open. Albie, volunteers to watch the map room, but he ends up burning it, what he thinks were the maps inside. And then in the meantime, everyone in the glade hides in the homestead, and Gally comes back screaming that the Grievers will take one of the gladers and kill them one per night. And during his yelling, a Griever comes and kills him, or takes him away or whatever. Minho follows the Griever and finds it goes through a hole, and basically the next part of the story is letting Teresa out of the slammer, allowing her to be trusted. They start working on the discovery that Thomas kind of figures out that the mazes are moving in word codes, when the walls move. And they begin all deciphering the codes. Minho and Thomas decide they want to go back out in the maze to do some overnight and deeper discovering. After being sort of disappointed, they weren't getting anywhere, Thomas decides to throw himself on a griever. He goes through the changing to see if he can remember any of his memories. He then shares how he was involved and how he thinks they were a test and how he thinks that they can escape. He shares his plan to go through the griever hole and types the code to end the game. Some of the main characters, along with about 40, I guess there were about 40 something gladers that agree to protect Teresa and Thomas so they can end the game. Albie ends up sacrificing himself, and they lose about half the gladers during that event, trying to fight off the grievers. I think there was like a bunch of them, 15, 20, I don't know. They walk down this tunnel and they discover, so Thomas, Chuck, and Teresa kind of jump into the cliff through that secret hole, and they find themselves the computer, and Thomas and Teresa Thomas is trying to fight off a griever, and Teresa's trying to punch in the code, and it's actually Chuck who ends up noticing that there's a button on the ground, and he punches and it kind of shuts down the game. And then they walk down this tunnel, and the other gladers start coming in, and they discover the creators. And the creator tells them that she's amazed at how few are dead, and then Gally appears, and he's being mind controlled by the creators. And he throws a knife at Thomas, but Chuck jumps in front and saves Thomas, and he's killed. And Thomas is very tortured, actually, by this event. And, he got really close with Chuck, and the whole thing was that he wanted to get him back home to his family. So this is hard for him to lose him. We don't see that so much, that closeness in the book or the movie the same way as the book. But that was a big part of the book, that moment. And suddenly all these grimy people break into the place. Their shots exploding, and some of the creators are killed. The rescuers, they take the kids and escape with them on a bus. And meanwhile, this rescuer woman in the bus tells them, Thomas, about the scorch and the disease and the things that were going on in the world, Wicked, the experiments. And then they arrive at some kind of building with a dormitory, and these gladers see this colorful place that has things with clean clothes and pizza, and they have this warm feeling of being saved and at peace. When the lights go out, they seem to sleep peacefully. Well, the book ends up ending with a Wicked memorandum that Ava Page tells them that the trials were a success, that the mission of Wicked is good, and the stage 2 implantation will happen soon. And then we get to this big spin and the cliffhanger ending that is very surprising line that ends up in the book saying that the Group B trials were equally as successful. So now we know that there's some sort of other group that was kind of treated the same way. And I would say, it's surprising overall when a book that's pretty decent or, has an interesting storyline isn't followed more closely. You lose a lot of thoughts of the characters, significant parts of the plot that kind of fuel the story along, and then you have these emotional scenes that define some of the characters' personalities that kind of are missing. And so my opinion of the book is that it reminded me a lot of The Hunger Games mixed with kind of the Peter Pan Lost Boys kind of age grouping, and then a kind of a bit of the Brave New World kind of thrown in. I thought the movie did a fairly decent job with the visuals, the looks of the maze, the gravers, the characters' plain costumes, and they didn't overuse, in my opinion, too many special effects the whole time. My main issues, honestly, with the movie was that the plot was really different. The timeline followed quite a different order, and the change in some of the characters' personalities, that was made a difference, and the lack of difference in age between some of the characters. Like, they all seem to be, in their like late teens, early 20s. I don't know how old the actors are actually, But, you know, in the book, there was kind of this range of boys' ages. I do try to realize and separate that there's kind of two different mediums, like film, books, you know, but sometimes due to time constraints or new creative liberties, you know, that's why some of the changes occur. I think that most agree if you read the book of a movie, they're generally usually always better and give you a totally different insight and depth to the characters and the storyline. But after sometimes reading a book, and for me, you know, like I like to read the book and then watch the movie. You know, sometimes it's hard for me to watch without cringing how much they change, and it's a little bit hard to separate the two. So I, you know, sometimes that's kind of like, you know, tough, but you kind of just, sometimes I just kind of have to pretend that I didn't read the book. So now that I commented, I might try to rewatch the film and kind of try to keep it as that separate medium. Feel free to leave your thoughts or comments about any of the major differences you caught or your opinion of the book or the movie in the comments section below. Thank you.